What's an ironic side effect of being poor? Would you like to know how much banks made during the pandemic solely off of charging overdraft fees? $12.4 billion just off of fucking overdraft fees. For those like myself who had multiple overdraft fees, call your bank's customer service line. I was able to recoup $105 back from the overdrafts. Some banks have different policies and will at worst tell you number. Worth it for us poor folk. My roommate is going through that right now. He has a bunch of recommended maintenance repairs that need to happen on his car. It's going to cost him more in the long run to get the repairs done later on down the line, but he doesn't have the cash right now to do the work. Throw away because I'd rather not share my life story with everyone I work with. I'm 23 now, living comfortably. However, I grew up poor with less than $30,000 annual income between my parents as a kid. They were both immigrants and didn't have the education or certification to get higher paying jobs. I had two brothers. Money was tight. We never had the things other kids did, never went on vacation. Both parents worked full-time. My brothers and I got jobs as soon as we were old enough to work. When I see the arguments like this, though, I have to disagree. It isn't expensive to be poor, it's expensive to spend money poorly. Yes, poor people might be less educated on how to spend their money, but that's not a given. My parents spent their money frugally. We ate simply but healthily, never went to restaurants or fast food, etc. By eating simple but healthy food like rice and chicken most of the time, being active and working, we stayed healthy. Never got cavities because we ate healthily and couldn't afford soda. It was always water. This is just one specific example. There are so many more. My parents worked hard and had no luxury in life so that they could raise us healthy and safe. I see people now, making what my family made, and spending it on frivolous purchases, going into debt for a new car, a new TV, new computer. These things feel good to buy, but aren't necessary. It pains me to see because the decision to take on needless debt is a mistake that will take years of effort to fix. Blaming others for these types of mistakes get us nowhere. Taking control of oneself and one's life is all we can do to make our lives better. Now I have graduated from community college and make more than my parents do, and can support them as they supported me. My little brothers have taken their own paths, but their hard work ethic and focus on the future has brought them success as well. I am not wealthy by any means, but perhaps my children will be. Shoes are the perfect example of this. I used to always buy at Walmart for $20, $25, but those would last me most of the year so it was okay. Then their prices kept going up, to the point where it was $45 for a pair of really shitty quality sneakers that wouldn't even last me 4 months. I was spending at least $150 a year on stupid shit shoes. Finally took the leap of faith and bought a pair of Merrells for $110 2 years ago. I'm still wearing them and actually just bought a second pair last month with all of the money I saved, so now I have 2 pairs to rotate between to make them last even longer. They last longer when they have time to completely dry out between wears. So I now have doubled the number of wearable shoes and I have saved at least $80 in the last 2 years. It becomes psychologically more difficult to save money. For rich people, money is a series of numbers based on budgets, goals, and liquidity. The brain gets used to handling money as something that can increase or decrease. For poor people, money becomes more of a binary switch. You either have it or you don't. This leads to many cases of poor people spending windfalls on stupid things until they go broke because they aren't used to making financial choices while having money. My ex has a deficiency mindset and he thinks in terms of $20 bills or at most, hundreds in his accounts. After I left him, I started aggressively saving so I could begin investing again. But before investing I wanted to make sure that I had funds for 3 months of expenses. The first $1,000 in savings took me a full 2 years to save. The next $1,000 only took 6 months. and now I regularly save more than I spend because my priorities include investing for retirement and my kids' college tuition. He regularly has trouble coming up with 50% of a child-related expense of $100 even though we make roughly the same amount in income and have similar hard expenses. I observed this in the worst way with my flatmate at uni. We got a £5,000 stipend for each semester, £10,000 for 12 months. I realized I would still require me to get a part-time job to make ends meet, rent, food, transport, etc. Flatmate grew up in a very deprived area and had never seen so much money in his life. First week of term we got given a check for £5,000 to deposit. Dude was literally shaking with happiness when we went to get it and then deposited at the bank. He seemed totally bemused when I mentioned how is the job hunt going. In his mind he was a millionaire. How could £5,000 not last for 4 months? Till next check at Christmas. I pointed out our rent alone was £750 each a month so he could just about get by with the rest but he would need to be careful. So we went to the pub that night. The dude bought our group like 4 rounds each saying don't worry he had loads of money now. Ran up like a £150 tab, which whilst not bank-breaking was a lot. He then decided to go to the casino with another mate and ended up losing like £900. Didn't seem bothered thinking he had loads left. For next month he had expensive takeaways almost every night. Went to the pub a lot and bought a PS3 and new widescreen TV. He apparently must never have checked his balance as he seemed genuinely shocked when he was bankrupt at start of October. Fortunately he seemed to learn from the experience, got a part-time job and was sensible with the next stipend. If you have $100 you can't make passive income that's worth anything. Any passive income would be a small signal lost in the noise of day-to-day costs. But you can acquire something that makes life easier for now. You can't make chicken salad from chicken shit. There's literally a certain amount of money you must have before it becomes worthwhile to invest it. Not to mention, all passive income is the other side of some form of usury. Which is to say, if anybody has passive income worth a damn, other people must be suffering. The poor, of course, are the ones suffering from the system, and conservation of value guarantees they can't turn an investment for themselves. I've been trying so hard to get out of this. After lockdown I managed to find a job that pays more than any job I've ever had, still not a lot but it's way more than I've ever had. And now I suddenly have this extra money that I get nervous and anxious about. I have money left over at the end of the month. What bill did I forget to pay? What item is going to break and need replacing? Should I get something I've been going without? But what if I need the money later? But when I first got the job I'd spend money and do all the things I had been putting off or wanting to do and I kept thinking that there was a couple hundred more than I thought. There were way too many times I'd check my account on the way to get groceries only to realize that I didn't have $250 left in my account. I only had $3. That's the good thing about a big city at least. If the wages are good I mean. Just take public transit or bike, maybe even walk. Yeah, rent costs more depending on the neighborhood, but even then if you're making good money, an iPad costs the same, Netflix costs the same, all that. This is the thing people forget about somewhere like NYC. Higher rent, but you get a monthly pass for like $120 or so, beats a car, and 24/7 trains and buses. But you can get cheap food, and the luxuries of life at similarly priced electronics, entertainment for home. So it can offset if you don't mind a smaller place. All depends though where you're at. Not sure if ironic as such, but on a positive note you become very good at fixing things. After spending many years on the breadline I become very good at fixing things. DIY with free cheap materials, pallets, appliance repair. Also being smart with purchases, like I brought a second similar model of our vacuum cleaner so I'd have spare parts should one break etc. Car repair, etc. You get to a point where something breaks and you can't afford to replace it. You can't afford to pay for it to be repaired. So you have to learn to fix it if it is essential. My dad started making good money when I was about 12, We were poor before that. He got into sales and excelled at it. Living in a poor neighborhood was much more fun than the upper middle class neighborhood. There were always kids out and about doing shit. People seemed more inviting in general. There were a lot of snooty kids I didn't like when we moved. You know what it was like in a poor neighborhood where I grew up. Neighbor would lock their kid in our enclosed porch so they didn't need a babysitter. Some asshole would poison cats and dump them in trash bags on the side of the highway. Guess whose cat went missing? Asshole teen neighbor decided it was fun to point a gun at other kids including me. Pipes would freeze in the winter and we'd be without water for a week until it was fixed. Rinse repeat. Teens would break through the siding of trailers and hang out in there and get drunk. I wasn't allowed to go anywhere or do anything unless I was accompanied by her while we lived there because it wasn't a nice place. But there were a few times I was left with a child molester great uncle because there was no one else to watch me and it was too expensive to pay a babysitter, and mom didn't know for sure that he was a pedo and figured that even if he were that he probably wasn't into boys. The worst thing that went down when we moved into a middle-class neighborhood? Our door got egged once. Mom didn't worry about me hanging out with other kids in the neighborhood anymore. Nobody got shot, no one locked their kid on our porch, no one was setting traps for cats and dumping them on the highway. You could actually go out and do shit because we were no longer poor and too hungry to not want to go anywhere or have to eat grapes at the store before we paid for them because we were ravenous, etc. It's great that you lived in a poor neighborhood where you felt safe enough to do that, but that's not the reality for a lot of people. Waspy upper middle class people are the fucking worst. They're almost always like either middle management types or just came from money and either way never had to do an honest day's work. One thing that the poor and the rich have in common that separates themselves from the upper middle class is cursing. If you ever have a chance to listen to a meeting of C-level executives, in my experience it's like listening to a bunch of dock workers talking about business and stocks. All sorts of cursing and aggressive talk, while the wannabe rich will act like they have to be proper and clutch their pearls at curse words or anything that seems to be improper. Sorry, that went places, but suffice it to say that if I can help it, I'm uplifting a poor neighborhood rather than moving to the suburbs. On that note, why are root canals so expensive? I'm literally suffering and the infection could kill me. If you just pull one of my front teeth, my job prospects go down the toilet and I'm going to have an even more difficult time paying for future dental work. I'm so fucking blessed to have some dental coverage at my job now. Bad tooth pain will shatter your whole world. I have 12 teeth right now, with only 4 upper teeth. I grew up poor, but my mom always made sure we took care of our teeth. We got the best toothpaste and mouthwash she could afford. I also have a lot of health issues I was born with. 5 congenital heart defects and 2 congenital lung defects, so I've always been on a lot of medications. I've always had Medicaid, thank God, so even though I have good dental hygiene because of things out of my control, I started losing teeth. We think it's because of all the inhalers and breathing treatments I've been doing my entire life. When I started losing teeth, Medicaid didn't cover partial dentures, or forget about implants. These were back teeth at first, so I didn't think it was a huge deal. But then my teeth started shifting, and then would break. I'm now waiting for a bilateral lung transplant. I had to get 10 teeth pulled last September before I could be listed. The hospital waived the fee because it was technically over the limit of what Medicaid would have covered. I'm a person that loves to laugh, and now I hate laughing in front of people because I only have 4 on top now. Wearing a mask helps. But I've been in the hospital over 120 days now and I still hate laughing in front of people when I'm not wearing a mask. And I'm so worried I'm gonna lose the 4 upper teeth I have left because they aren't next to any other teeth. Good teeth shouldn't just be for rich people. Poor people do everything they can in hopes to save a tooth because they can't afford to replace it. And even with dentures, you have to replace them again and again over time. But I fully believe that if Medicaid had covered partial dentures for me, I'd still have more teeth than I do now. And missing teeth doesn't make me dumb like some people think is funny to joke about. I don't know if anyone has done actual research on this, but I found that poor people are much more charitable than rich people. I used to be a volunteer firefighter, and we would have boot drives where a bunch of us stand in a busy intersection and beg for money. People in cheap cars would always stop and give money, while the guys in fancy new BMWs would speed right past her and not even make eye contact. People also overestimate the generosity of the super rich because they don't take into account relative wealth. Someone who has a net worth of $1 billion giving away $10,000 is the equivalent of someone with a $50,000 net worth giving away 50 cents. You can't save money. You can't buy in bulk or get memberships to bulk stores. Eating healthy is more expensive. You can't buy brands you like or even good quality brands. Clothing, housewares, healthcare, BC it's too much upfront due ending spending more later replacing the cheap products. Any drive visit becomes impossible even if you have ins. Without ins most poor PPL avoid the doctor, which makes things worse. Also, you can't afford to be healthy, so you're always getting sick. No sick time at job, so you got fired more easily. Your time becomes less valuable, which is unfortunate. Example, it could take a person riding the bus an hour and a half to get to work, so 3 hours commute every day, but if they had a car it would take 30 minutes. Rich PPL or even middle-class PPL have no clue how idiotic they sound when insulting the poor for buying needless things like entertainment or alcohol when they overspend way more on frivolous things. My boomer mother is this way, thinks if you're poor you don't deserve a vacation, or if your family abandon you it must your fault. Well-off PPL think it's laziness or lack or hard work that makes PPL poor, when really it's our bias system that keeps the poor poor and the rich rich. I was at a family dinner a few years back with this family friend we've known for ages, about the same age as my parents. My parents were going on and on about how good Costco was, the deals, etc., and they kept asking why she didn't shop there. Eventually she let slip that she couldn't afford the membership. They still couldn't comprehend it and were like, oh, but it pays for itself. Not if you absolutely can't afford it in the first place. I don't think I've ever seen cognitive dissonance in action like that before. The reason that the rich were so rich, Vimes reasoned, was because they managed to spend less money. Take boots, for example. He earned $38 a month plus allowances. A really good pair of leather boots cost $50, but an affordable pair of boots, which were sort of okay for a season or two and then leaked like hell when the cardboard gave out, cost about $10. Those were the kind of boots Vimes always bought, and wore until the soles were so thin that he could tell where he was an more pork on a foggy night by the feel of the cobbles. But the thing was that good boots lasted for years and years. A man who could afford $50 had a pair of boots that'd still be keeping his feet dry in 10 years' time, while the poor man who could only afford cheap boots would have spent $100 on boots in the same time and would still have wet feet. This was the Captain Samuel Vimes Boots theory of socio-economic unfairness. Terry Pratchett, Men at Arms, The Play. Limited tastes for foods. When you're poor, you can't afford to make mistakes cooking. You can't go, well, I tried, let's order pizza. If you try something new and fuck it up, you have to eat the fucked up food or go hungry. Because of this, poor people tend to make dishes they know how to cook well enough to not fuck it up. You might have 5-7 dishes you know that you rotate through to get some variety in your life, but that's it. Spaghetti, tacos, hamburgers, fish sticks, etc. Because you can't afford to mess up cooking, you don't experiment with food, and because of that, you don't develop a taste for different things. I think this is more of a US/cultural/modern thing. My parents grew up really poor, like third world country poor. No indoor toilets, fluoridated water, meat and eggs were rationed out, oranges were a treat, etc. They grew their own produce, had chickens, etc. So they had a diet of healthy food with some variety and many recipes passed down by generations. They just did not have enough at times. My grandparents lived through a famine.